What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I was going to show you how to train and repot my Wisteria Bonsai. Now, I believe the Wisteria from Japanese is called the Wisteria floribunda. The Wisteria from China, or the Chinese Wisteria, is the Wisteria sinensis. The North American Wisteria is the Wisteria frutescens, and then the Kentucky Wisteria is the Wisteria macrostatia. And I'm not exactly sure which one I have right here. A buddy of mine asked me to take care of it about a year ago. He gave it to me sometime last year in the spring, and it was really just this kind of like long stem right here, and then this spring it's just really kind of added on a bunch of mass. So if you know me, I'm really into bonsai. I like that, and I thought I've never actually had a Wisteria bonsai and wanted to see if I could actually grow it. I mean, they're known for their beautiful, showy flowers. The Asian varieties smell more than the American one and the Kentucky one. They're both pretty much unscented, but they still have the beautiful show-stopping flowers, and they are less invasive than their Asian cousins. Their Asian ones can actually grow into any crook and crevice or crack. I mean, the American ones can too, but they're not as invasive, and they're not as foreboding and kind of will take over your garden as the Asian ones will. So what I'm going to be doing today is just repotting him, taking him out of this massive cracked pot and putting him into one of these the mica grow pots for the bonsai trees. Now, I don't know if you know much about the mica pots, but they are great pots to have. They do resemble kind of showing pots, but they're not as expensive. And they are really well insulated. Mica is used in the electrical field for its insulation purposes. So it will keep your roots nice and warm and insulated during the wintertime, and kind of cool during the summertime, and help the roots grow and get air and everything else that your roots really do need. This type of pot is actually very, very, very durable, more durable than the plastic. As you can see, this is the plastic, and after a couple of years, it'll get water in it, it'll start to crack, and it'll be kind of worn down from the elements. The mica pots will not. You can actually drill through them. They come with rather large drainage holes in them, as you can see. And so you will need screens to put over the drainage holes, or all your substrate will fall out the bottom. Now, I just wanted to show you how to put some of these screens in. I've already done the first one, and I know you can't really tell, but I'll take my little screen here, set it over the top of the hole, and you can trim it if you want to, or you can just kind of leave it in there like I'm doing. The holes are pretty large, and then just kind of bend your wire to about where you want it. I've seen some growers will take it and crimp the edges, and then kind of put the wire underneath and then fold it up underneath there like that so it'll hold on to it. But I just kind of stick it through there and then fold it underneath, kind of like that. And I just set the screen right over top of the hole, and I will begin feeding the wire through it. Alright, so now yes, you want the wire to go all the way down, about as far as you can. It will probably crease the mesh a little bit, but that's fine. And then once you get the net down in there, you'll just secure the wire down to the bottom of the pot, and it'll stick out a little bit, so you can take your wire clamps and just clamp off a little bit of the extra, so you don't have a whole bunch just sticking out there. And then after you clip it off, just kind of press it down again to make sure it is there and it's holding. And then our mica pot is ready to go ahead and receive its plant. Now, as always, I always sanitize my pruning shears, my root rake, my root hook, and even my wire trimmers here, just to be cautious, because you never know what's on them. And if it's going to be around your pot or even the wire, the mesh, you want to err on a side of caution instead of bringing in disease and problems with your plant. Now, as you can tell, this wisteria has been in here for a long time. I can actually press on the pot and feel a bunch kind of just pressing back. So I know that it's going to be kind of full. It's probably going to be root bound, and it's going to make a mess. So as always, I've got my little bucket down here to catch any dirt and debris. And I will start off with my hands and just kind of start squeezing the root ball in the pot to kind of make sure I loosen it up a bit. And now I do recommend, if you do this, make sure you water your container about 24 hours before you decide to actually transplant your plant. Now all I'm doing is taking the pot, dumping it over a little bit, and letting the excess substrate come out the bottom, the top. And then I'm taking my other hand, trying to hold the plant in place, and I have the other hand on the container, and the plant should just go ahead and slide out. If it does not, that's okay. Just take your hands or your legs and continue to keep squeezing and providing pressure in there to make sure that you loosen the root ball up some. Now, and if the root ball is wet, this will be a lot easier. Alright, now I've got my root ball kind of where I wanted it. It kind of just all fell apart. That is fine. So I will be taking my root rake and just kind of gently go in here and knock about some soil to knock away all this from around the root ball, the root mass. And this guy's been in this pot for at least 2 years now. So I'm sure there are going to be pests and worms or just anything else that might just be down in the substrate, so just be careful. That's why I've got it in this bucket to catch all the dirt. And you're just gently kind of combing it around. You can add some pressure, but not a bunch. But it may take a little bit of movement and digging around in there to kind of loosen things up. And you can just grab your plant. Oh yeah. And just kind of hold him up. And then kind of dig in with your root rake. Now I believe it was the 12-inch mica pot. It might have been a 14. I know from inside to inside it's about 12 inches. Measuring from lip to lip on the outside is about 14 inches. And like I said, these pots are great because they look just like show pots, but they're nowhere near as expensive. This one pot cost me $21, especially if you're a beginner in the bonsai scene, because they're not too expensive. And as I said, the mica is a great insulator, so it really does help with the roots and helps them grow and keeps them from actually dying in the wintertime. Of course, you can add mulch on top to make sure that the cold doesn't get in down through the top of the pot. Now, generally with wisteria, it takes anywhere from about 3 to 5 years to flower. So I'm not exactly sure which wisteria I have yet. Once it does flower, I will be able to tell you exactly which kind I have. But until then, I do not know. If you feel like you know, be my guest. Let me know, because I would be interested in knowing. I'm hoping he'll flower this year or next, and I'll know for sure. These pots are pretty large, but we still want to get that root mass down considerably so that he'll fit in there all snug and have ample room to grow out. Now I am digging a little bit harder because I'm in the middle, or starting to get towards the middle of the root mass, and this soil's been compacted in here for years, so it may be a little bit harder to work out, so you may have to dig a little bit harder. Now I've got the root mass about where I want it to be, so I will take my sanitized pruning shears and just prune the roots down. And as a general rule of thumb, you can remove about 3/4 of a plant's root mass without actually causing harm to the plant. So You can prune these back pretty vigorously. Don't get too carried away. Okay, now you can tell how much smaller the root mass is. I got a bunch of soil in the mica pot. So now I will sit him back down and grab my substrate. Now, the ideal substrate for wisteria is something that has a good amount of nutrients in it, some compost, and also that it's pretty porous and drains relatively well. Wisteria does not like to be sitting in saturated soil all day, so you want it to be fairly quick draining, but you also want it to have a little bit of nutrients in there as well. So I use a special concoction of some bonsai soil mix, with a little bit of Miracle-Gro raised garden bed added just for the nutrients and the compost and stuff down in there. And a little bit of my cactus and citrus kind of stuff on the bottom so that water will drain freely out. And always, always, always mix the two in fairly well. It doesn't have to be 100% mixed in. A little bit of bonsai soil on the bottom, on top of the other soil, and I'll mix it in just a little bit, and then I'll take my compost and Miracle-Gro raised garden bed soil and add just a little bit in, and for added heft too. Now be warned, because wisteria is a very fast-growing vine, so it can actually reach up to 25 to 30 feet tall. So you will need something that's rather heavy to actually hold it in. And if it, luckily as a bonsai, it won't get too tall, because you can actually prune it back to where you want it. So you do want some substrate that's got added heft into it, and will actually be able to kind of hold it in place. A little bit more of this in here. And I'll make a little kind of divot in the center of the pot where the root mass will sit. As a little FYI, wisteria only flowers on new wood. So in the spring and in the winter, you can really kind of prune it back just like roses. You kind of want to prune it back fairly liberally. But as I said, it won't flower on old stems. It'll only flower on new ones. So I am going to prune him back just a little bit before I get him in exactly where I want him. And right now, I'm just trying to figure out what I want to cut off. Take your sanitized pruning shears. There we go. Now that looks pretty good. Now I've got an old stem coming up the side here with a little bit of leaves coming in. And then I've got a new stem right here, which hopefully may flower. It may not. Like I said, we don't know what kind this is. And some will flower. The fastest flowering one is the Blue Moon, the Kentucky Wisteria, Wisteria microstatia. And that one will flower in about 2 to 3 years. But the rest will take anywhere from about 3 to 15 years to flower. And wisteria that's actually grown from seed can take as long as 20 years to flower, if it even blooms at all. And you want to take care to cover up most of the roots. The elements can and will damage the roots, so for the most part, trim back or cover up as best you can. Now, it won't be possible to probably get every single one of them, but if you can, good. If not, not that big a deal. But get what you can, definitely. Now, the reason why I wanted to go so big with this bonsai mica pot is because a lot of people say that they do train wisteria. It's easier to train with one branch than it is with several, kind of like I have. So I may actually get a trellis or a little bean pole or bamboo pole or something for it to actually grow up on because it is a vine. It is a wooded vine, so it will support itself, but if it does have something to grow up on, it's even better for it too. Now, I really like bonsai soil. It's very porous and very nutrient rich for the bonsais. Alright, so of course we always want to tamp down the soil. We're trying to rid the substrate of any air bubbles that may have got in there that will kind of wreak havoc on the roots. So take your hands and go all the way around the top of the substrate in the entire pot and compact it all down. And it'll go down about an inch, inch and a half or so. And then just add more substrate in and make a mess like I did. Alright, before I add the rest of the soil, I'm going to take my 100% ground cinnamon and just kind of sprinkle over the area I just cut. Cover them up. I love the smell of cinnamon. It smells so good. Now, as we know, cinnamon is a natural antibiotic. So it will keep your plant safe, and any cuts that you do will keep any kind of infestation or bacteria or virus out of there and kind of keep your plant more healthy if you didn't add anything to it at all. So yeah, anytime you cut onto a plant and you're worried about creating an opening for viruses or bacteria to enter on a plant, you can use 100% cinnamon, and that'll keep stuff at bay. Alright, so it's about where I want it. I'm going to go back over the top again with a little bit of bonsai soil, just for aesthetic purposes. Got a lot of crushed clay and brick and rock in it, just to make it a little bit prettier than dirt. Now, you may be asking yourself why I did not wire my bonsai into the pot. And that's for my own purposes. I've got a lot of wire. I just didn't really feel like messing with that. By all means, if you want to wire your pot in there, wire your pot or your plant into the pot. I've got mine fairly compacted in there, so I believe it will hold. But I'll observe it for a couple of weeks and make sure that nothing's wrong with it. And if it does start to kind of lean over, I'll straighten it back up. But if it continues to do that, I will probably go ahead and install wires down in there. And with the mica pots, they only have the drainage holes in there. They don't have the wire holes in there like other bonsai pots do. But the good thing about them is that you can actually drill those into the pot. So you can add the wire holes in there yourself if you'd want. I just didn't feel like messing with that before this video. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is care for your wisteria tree or your bonsai tree or just specimen in general. Light requirements, you need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day or more. Now, especially if you're wanting the beautiful show-stopping flowers, you're going to need to give your plant a lot of light. It needs to be outside, and it needs to be unobstructed, and it needs to be for at least 6 hours. 8 hours would be even better. Now, they can tolerate some shade, but if you're giving your plant too much shade, it's probably not going to flower if it flowers at all, and if it does, they're probably going to be really scanty blooms and not be the ones that you kind of want or are expecting off of your wisteria tree. Water. With established plants, you really don't have to water unless you're experiencing some drought. If your plants are receiving less than an inch of water a week, you probably want to go ahead and step in and water your bonsai or your wisteria plant. But like I said, established plants really don't need a whole lot of water. They can get away with a little bit of a drought, but not much. So like I said, if it's less than about an inch of water a week, you can probably step in and go ahead and water your wisteria. And if it's not an established plant, you really don't want your substrate to dry out at all between waterings. You can stick your finger down in the pot and see, but for the most part, you really kind of want it to be a little moist. You don't want it to be saturated, and you don't want it to be dry. You kind of want it to be kind of right there in the middle on that fine line, but you can overwater wisteria really easily and end up succumbing your plant to root rot, so be very careful of that. Again, with the soil, Your pH needs to be around 6 to 7. So slightly acidic to slightly neutral, or to neutral, would be ideal. But as far as the substrate, it needs to be something that's a little bit heavy. And if your substrate in your yard or your soil isn't that well, you can add in some compost, and kind of fertilizing your compost or your wisteria once a year with a layer of compost really does kind of help your plant out. Established plants really don't need to be fed, but if you're wanting to improve the blooms, you can add in some phosphorus to actually help with the blooms. So in the springtime, if you want to, you can take a couple cups of bone meal and kind of mix it into the soil around the plant, and that'll help it out. And then in the fall, you can add in some rock phosphate to actually help your plant as well. But established plants don't really need to be fed a whole lot. You can, if you want to help with the bloom some, but you do not need to overfeed them, because if you do, you can end up with more leaves and more of a bushier plant and less bloom. So be very careful on fertilizing your plant a whole lot. Now with temperatures, the North American species and the Kentucky ones are way hardier than the Asian ones. So your Wisteria macrostatia, which is the Kentucky one, and then the Wisteria frutescens, the North American. The North American one can go to zone 5 to 9, and the Kentucky can go from zones 4 to 9. So the Kentucky is a little bit hardier, and it does bloom a little bit faster, but the North American one is also pretty as well. Now, I do know that Wisteria does have a little bit in the way of pests. You can deal with scale, spider mites, aphids, and all kinds of other assortments that will probably wreak havoc on your plant. So as you go over and you kind of transplant it, look your plant over really well and see if you see anything kind of moving around on it, or anything that looks like it might not supposed to be there, because chances are they're probably not. But this guy does have a lot of blooms on him, or a lot of leaf spots, so it almost looks like scale, but I can tell it's just where the leaf nodes are, so he is fine. Now with the pruning, you really kind of want to prune back stems that are in the way of other stems. So as you can see, I've got one here, one almost directly underneath it, and then one underneath that one. So if I take this middle one out, that's going to leave room for this bottom branch and this top branch to actually get some sunlight. And then again, we're going to be looking for plant or stems that might be somewhat in the way of other stems getting the right amount of light. So that's how we will go ahead and select which ones we want to prune back and which ones we want to actually keep. Alright, now as you can tell, I did a lot of pruning on here. Now this will encourage the plant to actually send out more shoots and branches and kind of bush out some. So I think I'm happy with right where he's at. And then he'll start to kind of fill out a little bit more, and we will go from there. Now the next step that I want to do is go ahead and water the plant. I will take some distilled water and kind of water around the top of the substrate all around to kind of help rid any more air bubbles that might be down around in the substrate around the roots. And like I said, you want him to sit into a spot where he's getting at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. And all I wanted to show you with on how to train him, most of him is where I want him to be. I might actually try to wire this little stem here because it keeps leaning. Alright, now I've got the plant wired just a little bit to kind of straighten out this top apical stem here. And over time I will probably go back in and check on it just to make sure it is kind of standing where I want it to. It's no longer crossing the other branch, so we'll have to work with it a little bit more, but I think he's okay for now. Well guys, that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Until then, leave me a comment and let me know if you've ever had any kind of success or failures with your wisteria plants or with your Wisteria Bonsai. Like I said, this is my first one I've ever done. It is pretty fun, and I do look forward to hearing about some of your comments and your successes and failures too. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube. Real quick, I wanted to thank my Patreon subscribers. Pam donated this month. If you're interested in supporting my channel, please check for the link below in the description box.